When hiring or selecting senior people for your organization, what abilities and characteristics are most important to you?
It depends on the job. Generally, characteristics that we look for in everybody are integrity, an intellectual curiosity, commitment to a good work ethic, broad general knowledge of what is going on in the world around him or her, and particularly so in senior hires today, a knowledge base in a field where we need expertise so that we can substantively advise our clients. If we're looking for an environmental specialist, we want someone who has had experience with environmental organization, with environmental regulations, with the enforcement of our environmental regulations. If it's in the healthcare field, we want someone who really knows the pharmaceutical industry, someone who knows how FDA works. Increasingly, we are a knowledge-based company where we provide counsel on what the decision should be, and not alone the mere fact that we're communicating that decision. I, some years ago, made a talk in which I said there has been a maturation of public relations over the last 30, 40 years. And the progression has been, first we had the how do I say it era, and that was probably up until the 60s, when management would make a decision, call in their publicity manager, publicity director, some call them public relations directors, and said, you know, we've decided to do thus and so, write it up for us so that we can get it out to the media. And so the PR person would go down to his typewriter and write the story, and they'd send the release out, and newspapers would publish it. In the 60s, which was a very decisive decade for public relations, perhaps the most decisive decade of all, where there was so many changes in society in that decade, women's rights, minority rights, the consumer's right to know, environmental laws, truth in lending, that public relations really came to the fore. There were a lot of protest marches, and really CEOs weren't prepared for that kind of environment. And hardly any other people in the organization were either. So the logical person who had to deal with them was the public relations person. And I think public relations moved from how do I say it to what do I say when these women marched on corporate headquarters, or when there were protest groups from NGOs who were asking about more information on pricing or ingredients or some other subject. So the public relations person escalated, I think, in importance within the organization. And in more recent years, it has advanced even more to, from what do I say to really what do I do. And today, if you look at the organization charts of many of the Fortune 100, 500 companies, you'll find that the senior public relations communications officer is usually on the management board, has a title of senior vice president, or in some cases executive vice president, and really is part of that decision-making process that the CEO has to articulate, and is playing a vital role in the management of the company, in addition to the communications function, which comes after the decision-making and the behavior of the company.
The Tylenol crisis in the early 1980s has subsequently been written about in many public relations textbooks as being an excellent example of crisis management. Will you please explain the evolution of that term crisis management and specifically the role your agency played in that event?
I really don't know the evolution of the term crisis management. I think that it very likely preceded Tylenol, but I'm not sure. I think, however, we as a public relations firm, as much as any other, helped make crisis management part of the common industry vernacular. We were brought into the Tylenol situation for two reasons. First, we had them as a client when, for some years after they went over the counter back in the 70s. The first crisis was 1982. And also, as part of Young and Rubicam, which we became part of in 1979, Ed Ney, who was then the CEO of Young and Rubicam when it first broke, suggested that to Jim Burke, their CEO, that perhaps Burson Marsteller could help them. I, at the time, happened to be in Europe. I was in Paris. My associate, Jim Dowling, who was our number 2 person at the time, started talking with Jim Burke and also with Larry Foster. And the hero of Tylenol was basically Jim Burke, I think, and I'm pretty sure that Larry Foster would agree with me on this, that Jim really managed that crisis. For several weeks, he spent full time managing it. And also he played a very major part in the communications and the decision-making part leading up to the communications for that crisis. We had the privilege of supporting Jim and supporting Larry in that crisis. One of the things that we did that I think helped in the resolution and restoration of the product regaining market share was the fact that we suggested that instead of having one big press conference in New York to reintroduce the repackaged tamper-resistant Tylenol packages, that instead of having one big press conference in New York, that we have about 30 downlinks to local markets and make it a local story. And at that time, it actually made it 2 local stories because it was so early in the days of the use of satellite transmission that the fact that we were doing a satellite press conference not only showed the importance of how important Tylenol felt it was to inform the public about this, but it also was really reported as a technological achievement where people said, gee whiz, they're able to have this conference at the Waldorf up in New York, and the local press is invited to a local hotel here, a local venue, to see the press conference. And instead of being buried someplace back in the paper, we dominated a lot of front pages in the major markets for the product. We got a lot of credit for participating in that, but as I would say, I think the real drivers of that program were Jim Burke, who was the CEO, Larry Foster was his chief public relations person. We were very privileged to work along with Saddam. When the second Tylenol crisis came on, 1985, I actually participated very deeply, personally, in that one. And again, same pattern was followed. Jim Burke ran the program. He set up more or less a war room in one of his conference rooms, and for days and days and days, he just devoted full time to trying to get that situation resolved.
Could you please explain what was the second crisis in 1985?
Second crisis was in Bronxville, same type thing. Somebody was able to penetrate the package and put toxic material in the product, and I believe 3 people died.
Do you recall which city?
Bronxville, New York.
Okay.
Yeah, it was not very far from here.